You do not need fancy camera gear to achieve high quality video. I've said this before and I'll continue to say it again. Gear really doesn't matter, which is why in today's video, I'll be breaking down the best iPhone video settings, everyday practices, as well as do's and don'ts that can legit make or break your footage. I've also included a more in-depth guide to mastering your iPhone's photo and video settings down below in the description. So if you're serious about creating and wanting to learn exactly how to maximize and achieve your iPhone's full potential, make sure to check that out. That said, I first want you to open up settings and scroll down to camera. Because this is strictly about video, the settings tend to be a little bit easier to understand. And throughout this video, I'll do my best to simply explain it so you actually know why you're changing the settings you're changing. First, click on camera. We're not going to worry about system settings or app settings because, again, those are all just photo related. However, under record video, I want you to click on this and you're going to see a list of different options. For regular video, I always recommend you set your resolution at 4K. Plain and simple. When it comes to frame rate, that becomes a little bit more subjective, and let me help you understand. I would say the majority of videos you consume are shot in 24 frames per second. That's because this is the most true to life video format. But again, shooting in 4K 30 isn't a bad option, as this is very commonly used for things such as social media. So for short form content on Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, or even TikTok, this is probably going to be the best option. But again, you're always safe going with 4K 24, and that's what I personally use. Now, if you select something like 4K 60, this is really only meant to be used if you plan to slow down the footage later in post-processing or when you plan to edit the video. That's because it doesn't have a very true to life look. It's too smooth and the video flows very unnaturally, but it shines in slow motion, maybe if you're trying to get a super cinematic slow panning shot or a different type of situation. Scrolling down for show PAL formats, this is only used if you live in Europe, Africa, Asia, or South America. Because I'm in the United States, I have this toggled off. Below that, we have enhanced stabilization. As the name clearly states, this stabilizes your video. For things such as handheld video where you don't have a gimbal, this is going to be your best friend. Action mode lower light literally says it decreases the stabilization, so keep this off. And below that is HDR video, which, as unpopular as this may sound, I know some people agree and others don't, I keep this off. I tend to notice this overexposes all my videos, which just means it's brighter than what it should be. So if you want a more accurate representation of what the real world looks like, keep this off. And it'll also make editing the video later much easier. Auto FPS, please keep off. I know it does say it automatically reduces the frame rate to improve low light video and optimize file size. That's not important. Lock camera is a bit situational. Let me explain. Let's say, for example, I'm filming a video on my iPhone and I get really close to a subject and it activates macro mode. That's switching the lens, which I don't want unless I want that to happen. The reason this can become a bit confusing is if I'm moving a lot of environments, my iPhone is going to automatically switch the lens for the best possible look, but it doesn't always result in the best possible look. Lastly is lock white balance. Basically, all this does is just keep your white balance consistent throughout the entire video. For slow motion, I have my settings at 4K at 120 frames per second. However, if you want to prioritize a slower motion video, then feel free to select 1080p at 240 FPS. Just keep in mind you're going to experience a slight quality loss. Record cinematic, which I'll touch on a little bit later throughout the video, I have mine set again to 4K 24 frames per second. There's no issue setting this at 4K 30. It really just comes down to preference. For record sound, I have this set to the default settings at stereo and allow audio playback on and wind noise reduction on. Under formats, most of this is photo focused, but feel free to copy my settings as well. Camera capture I have is high efficiency. This really doesn't affect video, but I just keep it to that. Apple ProRes I have turned on, and ProRes encoding I have set to log. I'll touch on that and share my take later in the video. For preserve settings, again, a lot of these apply to photo, but some do apply to photo and video. Keep creative controls on, macro control on. This is that little flower icon in the bottom left corner. Exposure adjustment, please keep on. This is, in my opinion, the most important setting. A couple more best practice settings I always keep on are grid and level. The grid will allow you to frame your shots properly, which will also allow you to utilize the rule of thirds. This is good basic things to get used to. I have grids on all my cameras, all my phones, because I never want to rely on my eyesight to just frame a shot. I'd rather use lines and proper level lines to accurately assess that. Same applies for level. As self-explanatory as this sounds, whenever my shot is off balance or not level, it'll let me know. And when it is properly level, it'll show up in a gold yellow bar. To keep things straightforward and consistent, I will be just using the camera app for this video. I do understand there are better apps such as the Blackmagic camera, which really allows you to truly turn this into a mirrorless camera. That's a video for another time. Today, I just really want to cover the basics, whether you're just starting out or you are experienced. So hopping into the camera application and swiping over to video, video, let me first explain to you what we're looking at and how to look at it. In the top left, we obviously have flash. Unless you're going for this specific aesthetic, I keep this off all the time. You can also press and hold on it, if I remember correctly, and you can toggle it on, off, or auto. Never put this on auto. Never let your camera judge a situation. Manually do this. I promise you will give the best results. To the right of that is our exposure meter, which we turned on in the preserve settings. As the name explains, just preserves the settings that you have made every time you reopen the camera app. So if you set it to 4K 30, 4K 60, or 4K 24, it's gonna reopen that with the same frame rate and resolution every single time unless you change it. Now, a good rule of thumb is I love to drop my exposure to -3 or -7, even -1 in certain situations. That's because Apple's video straight out of the iPhone tends to look extremely overexposed. To the right of that, we have ProRes log, and I have a very unpopular take with log video. The fact that log is now incorporated on flagship smartphones is amazing. I love that. Both of these videos are shot in Sony's S-Log 3, as it gives you more freedom and control when color correcting and color grading. However, the downsides, especially on the iPhone, don't really make it worth it. Here's why. For one, this is just the internal storage on my iPhone, and as you can see, my max time is 5 minutes. Not to mention, log video file sizes are out of this world. Because of that, it also makes it harder to edit. And if you have no experience when it comes to color correcting and converting log footage, it's an extra step that I only advise if you really know how to do it. Because as crazy as this might sound, turning off ProRes, I think even looks better unless you're an experienced colorist. The only time I enable ProRes log video is when I have an external SSD plugged in, which allows my max time to go up into the hundreds of minutes. But most of the time, I'm keeping that off, and I think the majority of people should as well. Clicking the arrow up, this will give you the flash as well, exposure meter, and ProRes as well, but there's also a mode on the far right called action mode. I would just keep it off. To help you understand your lenses, at the bottom you have your main fusion camera, the top is your ultra wide, and to the right is your telephoto. If you want the best result out of your iPhone, film in 1x or 24 millimeters. This will utilize the best camera lens that your iPhone is capable of. Never ever use the dial to zoom in. This just digitally zooms, which butchers your footage. I only recommend shooting in any one of these modes, 0.5, 1, 2, or 5. And if you really want to get specific, I really only recommend shooting in 1x or 5x, as 5x activates the telephoto lens and 1x uses the best lens. As crazy as this may sound, I'm not a fan of the ultra wide camera. It requires a lot more light, and unless that's the specific style you're going for, don't use it. Heading over to cinematic, this is actually one of my favorite camera modes that not very many people talk about. That's because this camera mode allows you to adjust your aperture as low as f2.0 to f16. To help you understand, the lower the number, the more light your camera is letting in, which is the blurrier the background. If you're filming a landscape, I recommend shooting in f5, f6, or even f9. But if you're shooting a very close-up product, or you really want to focus on something specific, shoot in the lowest aperture possible, and when in doubt, shoot in f2.8. That's what I shoot all my content on because that's all my lens provides. But in a lot of times, I'm dropping that all the way to 2.0. I just love the look it gives off. The same applies. I also really drop my exposure to get that really cinematic look, and it keeps your same quality. I love this mode. It's very, very slept on. I only recommend shooting in slow motion if you're really planning to slow down your footage. 9 times out of 10, I'd just recommend you to bump it up to 60 FPS. But if you want to get a insane slow motion, hop over to the slow-mo tab, up it up to 120 or even 240, and shoot it from here. Another tip that may come obvious, but don't use the front-facing camera. It is nowhere close to the quality of the back-facing camera, and I get in certain situations if you're doing a talking head TikTok, that's understandable, but please just try to shoot with this as much as you can. Another thing I'd advise you to do is wipe off your lenses. A lot of people film with smudged up lenses as we naturally touch them, even by accident, and this can drastically affect the quality of both your photo and video. Now that we've understood the basics, here's some pro tips that people don't tell you. When it comes to focusing, you have two different options. Just simply tapping. This is if you want to focus on a specific subject or a person. And second, you have what's called locking focus. This means no matter what happens, the focus will continue to stay on that subject or person no matter what, unless you click off. I previously touched on how you can adjust the exposure through the meter, and you can also do that through the sundial, but I don't recommend doing that. That's because this adjusts the exposure on the specific thing you're focusing on, which if that's what you want to do, perfect. But using the exposure meter, this adjusts the exposure for the entire shot, not just what you're specifically focusing on. What is so slept on that few people talk about is the fact you can actually color correct your video straight from your iPhone, and it's really good. Take this video for example. This is a beautiful roller I shot of a Lamborghini Aventador, and you can actually color grade this to look a lot better than how it already looks. As you can see, the enhanced stabilization makes this shot look beautiful and buttery smooth, but we can make it better. First, I want you to click the 3 little lines at the bottom, and this will bring up the editing mode. Obviously, you can crop your video, and you can even slow it down. So this video was shot in 60 FPS, but if I click on 50 FPS, this will slow the video down, and look how buttery smooth that looked because it turned it from 60 FPS to 30 FPS, which downscales it by a percentage, which smooths it out. That's why shooting in 60 FPS can be very, very beneficial. But the real sauce here is under the adjust tab. Now, you can click auto, and this will make some basic adjustments that I think are very solid. But to get a little bit more specific, you can actually go in and fine tune things such as exposure. Maybe it wasn't properly dialed in. Highlights, I like to drop my highlights, up my shadows as it adds a more cinematic look. We're basically just enhancing the image. You can touch brightness, black point, and saturation, which just makes the video look a lot better. And keep in mind, I'm doing this all through the Photos app in my iPhone. But if you want the simplest way to color correct your videos, the filters Apple gives you are actually pretty good. So you have original, vivid warm, which is one of my favorite, and vivid cool, and dramatic. I think dramatic is really cool. It is a little decolored, so what I like to do is go back into the actual adjust tab and up the saturation, as I feel like it's a little colorless. Look how cinematic that looks. That was shot on an iPhone. We can literally hit done, save it just like that, play the video. Man, that looks good. That looks really good. And I can send it to friends or family. Airdrop it just like that. That's really it. That said, if you got value from today's video, feel free to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.